Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Boca Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Holritz. Happy Monday to you for those of you that are live streaming with us. And just happy day to anybody who's listening anywhere, anytime. It's good to have you here. And I appreciate you being part of the Boca Podcast community. Make sure that you're following us at Boca Podcast. Would love for you to keep up to date with the upcoming live streams and episodes that we're going to be putting out. Would love to see you come be part of these live streams when you have the opportunity to as well. And so again, Boca Podcast on Instagram. You can see the upcoming schedule there. I do want to go ahead and introduce a brand new guest on the show today. I have Kristin Sweeting with me here. Kristin, thank you so much for coming to do the show.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Me too. And you know what? Something we chatted for a few minutes before we got started, and I didn't say this to you beforehand, but I was actually just talking to my daughter. My daughter's a senior in high school. She's graduating this year, and she dropped by earlier. And I was saying, this is going to be an interesting conversation because for anybody who hasn't seen the title yet, we're going to be talking about how to increase pricing, or the idea of increasing pricing using our portfolio. And I have some pretty strong opinions about this topic. So I think just for that reason, this is going to be a really interesting conversation. So I'm looking forward to a bit of back and forth, especially with your experience, Kristin, as a photographer. And on that note, will you just briefly introduce yourself and your brand to our audience?
Yeah, I'm excited for the conversation and see if we have any shared or different opinions. It'll be fun. I'm Kristin Sweeting. I have been running a photography business in Nashville, Tennessee for the past 13-ish years. And now I also host a podcast, the Dangerous Creatives Podcast, and do coaching and education and workshops as well. So I'm just out here having lots of fun and excited to get to chat about something that I'm really passionate about today. So thanks for having me.
No, I'm excited. It's also always nice to have a podcast host on the show who has decent audio to go with the conversation too. So that's kind of fun. A little nerding out here, but I guess that maybe the best thing to do before we get into the conversation, I just want to, for everybody listening and watching, to be able to see your site, which, just immediately, and you're doing your job well, you're practicing what you preach, because immediately when I land on your site, there is some level of impact that I experience here. And for anybody who's not live streaming with us, you can just go to Kristin, Kristin, Sweeting.com to see exactly what I'm talking about. But there's an immediate impact in that that homepage of your site, before I do any kind of scrolling or anything, is quite different than the average photographer. It has very much an editorial feel, big, bold font, and black and white imagery with high motion, just really, really impactful. So I got to give you props for that. And for those of you listening in who are not following Kristin on Instagram, make sure that you go do the same. Go do that. It's Kristin Sweeting, the same thing, Kristin Sweeting on Instagram. Of course, we'll link to all of this in the show notes at bocapodcast.com. Kristin, we'll come back to your website because we'll certainly use that as a jumping off point for our conversation and this discussion about portfolio for the sake of increasing pricing. But I do have a couple of introductory questions I want to get into just a little bit. The primary intention of this podcast, outside of generally adding value to the community, is about helping photographers build sustainable businesses, i.e., working intelligently, working more efficiently, so that they can both run a healthy business, but then also have a life, not get burnt out in the process, right? And I'm curious if there's a principle related to that you've learned over the years that's been impactful in your business that's enabled you to have a little bit more freedom and flexibility in your life.
Yeah, totally. Well, first of all, a lot of my business journey has been through overcoming challenges that required me to have lots of energy freed up to, for a while it was an autoimmune disease I was dealing with, and then had a small child, and then was single parenting a small child. So a lot of these business decisions were kind of made to try to hold both things at the same time. Like, how do we take really great care of our clients and do this other thing, like have a family and be healthy? And, so I know that you're passionate about that as well. But so just one tip that I think can change everyone's business is not just seeing, like, pricing, obviously we're going to get into that, but not just seeing the sales relationship as over after the initial booking. There are so many different stages in the client experience process where you can not only add value to your client, but also increase your revenue and your booking for that client. Because we know that, booking a new client, it takes way more effort, way more money for bigger companies, than way more lift than kind of increasing what you're doing with one client. So just some easy points of reference is like a few months before your event or your shoot or your wedding. That can be a great time to see if there's more services or products someone wants, and also after. And so you kind of are helping your client and you're helping your business be more healthy at the same time.
That's an interesting one. You know what? And this might be an interesting topic to come back to at a different point, maybe even with yourself if you're willing to. There's a phrase, an acronym that's used a lot in the startup world, especially as it relates to software companies or software service companies, called LTV, lifetime value of a customer.
Yeah.
And the intention, of course, is to increase that average LTV across the board. And that's not something that we talk a lot about. In fact, really, I don't hear it discussed in the photography industry. It's always about getting the one client, getting the shoot. And certainly in the context of family photography, for example, there is conversation, baby photography, about return clients, maybe booking a package. But even that package kind of has an end point. And I just haven't heard any conversation about that idea of lifetime value of a customer and working to increase that intentionally. So that's interesting. I love that you brought that. I haven't had that thought before, and it's a good point of discussion. Maybe we can kind of come back to at a different point. Can you give just one tangible example of how you're working to, I guess, increase the sale, or how much you're getting per client in your own business?
Totally. Yeah. So I predominantly do weddings, but I am really passionate about having lifetime clients. So I do have clients come back year after year to do other types of photo shoots too. I end up working with their siblings and with their, with other people in their family, their friends. So, a lot of the things that go into this pricing conversation are going to be around taking such good care of people that they want to keep having you back. And yeah, that lifetime value, it's so much cheaper to continue to work with the same clients over the long run than to constantly be hustling for that next booking, hustling for, the cold outreach from someone. So I think it's a smart business move, and it's really fulfilling too. But one tangible thing is, at the time of booking, I try to make it really easy for my clients. They have so many different decisions on their plate when they're planning a wedding, when they're deciding what they want in their photography package. So a lot of times I'll say, hey, let's just decide one thing today, if you want full day coverage or full weekend coverage. And once you decide that, we can kind of add things on later. So I prepare them that later on I'll check back, and maybe they want to add another day of coverage, or an album, or an engagement shoot, or a boudoir shoot. So, I see it as client experience and really good customer service, but it's also increasing that, lifetime value of that client, even in that year before you even get to the wedding.
And it's that proactive effort of having the conversations, kind of proactively managing their expectations that this is coming down the road. I like that. Yeah, I've heard a little bit of that over time from photographers. It's never something that I did intentionally in my business, and I know that I missed out as a result. It was kind of like, let's charge a premium for the wedding up front. And at the end, we were making a really nice premium, 7 to 10K average, when myself and my partner were taking on these weddings. But I know that we missed out on thousands of dollars in revenue, but not thinking beyond that. And so I think this is a really good reminder, and maybe there's opportunity to come back and kind of explore that in more detail down the road. But I want to get to the next question. So part of developing a business that is sustainable is about kind of focusing on that. It's almost like that 80-20 principle, right? What are the 20% of the ideas, the principles that do 80% of the heavy lifting in our business, the core principles, if you will, because it's so easy, especially with our easy access to content, whether it's video content or books, audiobooks or otherwise, or workshops, courses, to just kind of, I guess, overwhelmed by the amount of information and the possibilities about what we could be implementing in our business. But at the end of the day, what I've realized, being in business now for about 20 years, is that really it's a few core principles that do a lot of the heavy lifting. And so to that end, I'm curious if there's a primary principle that you have found some of the most success from in your business by implementing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely relate to all the different ways of marketing can be super overwhelming. Are you on TikTok? Are you on YouTube? Are you doing all these things?
That's true.
And I do think like picking two things and like sticking to them is such a great tool for anyone that's running a small business. Like if you don't have a huge team, be really good at two things. So I'll tell you the two things for me. And I mean, the main one thing, like the 80% that you're talking about, is focusing on people first. And I think a lot of people understand this when it comes to their clients. They're like, yeah, I'm definitely going to put my clients first. I'm definitely going to prioritize their experience and make sure that everything's running smoothly. But they forget kind of all the other people in the picture. And this is specifically weddings, but every other vendor that we work with, the parents, the bridesmaids, the guests, like we'll have friends of the couple come up to us afterwards and be like, you made the day so much better. Or we loved watching you work. We loved interacting with you. They'll follow us on Instagram. We end up getting so many referrals from one wedding. So I kind of say as an encouragement to people, you know, now 13 years down the line, I don't have to market my photography business that much because there's years of relational equity there, with not with just with vendors, but with couples and their friends. And so I think in a world where we're all looking for like a quick fix and a silver bullet, we don't put the effort in where it really is meaningful long term, and it doesn't pay off right away, which is why I think it can be frustrating. But once it does pay off, I have one client from 10 years ago that is still sending me work now. So I really think that like focusing on people first and thinking of like all the people in the equation, not just your couple. Because the word of mouth, I mean, I think they're like 10 to 20 times more likely to get a booking from a referral than like from a cold ad. Like referral marketing is so powerful. So really starting with that core element of focusing on people first and making everyone feel special when you show up to work an event is going to be like your strongest thing you can do in your business.
I like that phrase, relational equity. I wrote it down. That's I don't think I've heard a photographer say that before. That's a really great way to sum that up, relational equity. And it's so true. There's so many different directions that we go in our marketing efforts, and it's easy to really actually to get distracted. It's not that there's not opportunity there, but as sole proprietors, and probably most cases, the people listening in, there's only so much that we can juggle. So we do need to kind of focus in on 2 or 3 channels and really become experts there. And it's so funny, I think, at the end of the day, because I've been in this industry long enough to see some pretty significant changes, right? When I started in film in 2001, the advent of social media in that process, the switch to digital, there have been a lot of significant changes. And yet, despite all those changes, at the end of the day, what probably still carries the most weight is those relationships. And that really can't be missed.
It's timeless, which is part of our brand, so it kind of fits in. It's very aligned because, we do use social media, but I'm with you. When I started my business, Instagram wasn't around. And, now it's a huge source of business for a lot of photographers. But that one timeless thing that goes through all of it, and even as part of our social media strategy, is those relationships and just being known for doing a really good job and over delivering for people.
I do have one quick question on this, and then we'll move on kind of the primary topic at hand. But I was just having another conversation about this with a photographer yesterday. Januaris Rodriguez is a guest that we had on the show back in episode, I think it was like 269, a little while back. But we were talking about the tendency that a lot of photographers have to kind of label themselves as introverts, and how that ultimately, that box that they've put themselves in, it limits them when it comes to relationships. And we were talking about it more in the context of relationships with other photographers, working to kind of build those connections in the photography community in your local market. But I think it holds true as well that if we're going to actually build relationships, whether it's clients or vendors or other photographers, that we can't allow ourselves to get stuck in that little tiny box that we called introversion and allow that to limit us from actually making the effort to get out from behind our computer. Yeah, it's convenient to be on our phone or our computer and be on social media, but to actually get out and make those connections. What's your perspective? Having been in the industry for a little bit now, what's your perspective on where we're at with that right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of things made that more challenging. A lot of things in the last few years made it more challenging and made us kind of want to pull back and hide. And I think even if you consider yourself introverted, which I'm kind of 50-50, introverted, extroverted, like right on the line. But I think even if you consider yourself introverted, you can go into a situation where you have to be social and carry with you, like, how can I serve this person? How can I help them achieve their goals? So if having the attention on you feels uncomfortable, think about how can I put the attention on someone else?
That's it.
And I mean, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, that is powerful. When you can come along and help someone else achieve their goals, that is powerful.
I've seen this in my own life in particular as of late. And I guess maybe there's some level of development of self-awareness. I'm putting a lot of work into getting better as a human being, at least trying to. And one of the things that I realize is what you just pointed out, which is those times when I get stuck in my head and I'm thinking about myself, and maybe I have justifiable reason to be thinking about myself or something that somebody did to me or the situation that I'm in. But it's so easy in the world that we live in now, because we've got it kind of, relatively speaking, in first world culture, we've got it pretty easy. So we have the time and the space to think about ourselves a lot. And as sole proprietors, we're home during the day, probably most of us working from our own office, and it's quiet. And again, even more opportunity to think about ourselves, to go inward, right? But it's so fascinating how what feels like a big deal or feels like a big problem, this dramatic situation, becomes a lot less so the moment that we redirect that focus from here outward, to look for an opportunity to, even if it's something as small as reaching out to somebody and saying, hey, I hope you're having a really great day, or making an effort to go meet with somebody in person, or make an effort to somehow impact your client by surprising them with a gift, whatever it might be, but focusing outward. I love that I think you used the word serve or service there, that focusing on serving others. It's amazing how much life gets better when we redirect that focus.
It really does. I definitely tend to be someone that overthinks things and gets overwhelmed and can be anxious. And yeah, turning the attention to someone else, or how can I partner with someone or come alongside someone or help someone else's day be better, it really has, kind of poked a hole in a lot of those things that have been challenging for me in the past. And also just getting outside and moving and changing what our body's doing has been huge too. If you tend to be someone that's like, I don't know, should I charge 5,000 or 6,000, or should I post this on Instagram or not on Instagram? Like, go for a walk, go talk to a friend. Like, It's not as big a deal when you get outside of your head as it is inside of your head. I'm talking from experience.
Same, brilliantly summed up. And I think that's great. And some of our regular listeners might be like, Nate, you always go back to this conversation, but certainly there's a bit of subjectivity there, because
I do too.
I can very much relate, Kristin. But I've seen so much of this in our industry, and I see how it's limiting people. I've also, from personal experience, having been a so-called introvert, how to step beyond that intentionally and go way beyond that, for that matter, that it's possible. But you really do have to learn to shift the way that you're thinking in order to enable that. And so I'm going to continue to come back to this, but I appreciate you entertaining the conversation with me. I do want to get into this conversation about pricing. And I know it's really commonplace, and I'll focus mainly on wedding photographers, because I think that the conversation, I don't know if it's most common, but certainly it's one that I'm most familiar with wedding photographers. And of course, that's your focus. It was what I focused on as well. Wedding or portrait, though, photographers are looking for the opportunity to be able to increase their prices, shoot less, make more. And it's an understandable trajectory that most want to do. Now, there's a side conversation, which is there is a limited amount of market available at that kind of mid to high to super high end. We'll call it 15 to 20% of the market. Most photographers are trying to work to get to that place, it seems. And we have to understand that if we're doing that, we're getting into a crowded space. Nonetheless, there are different ways to go about raising our prices, or at least from our own perspective, justify raising those prices. And you're suggesting that one of the ways that we can enable that, to make that more feasible, is to focus on our portfolio, to improve the quality of our portfolio. And I'd love if you just kind of give an introductory context to that conversation so everybody understands a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I think there's lots of things that go into raising pricing, but this portfolio piece is one that I notice gets overlooked a lot. People often focus on the marketing and the selling and a lot of the other pieces of the equation. But to me, portfolio is a huge piece of storytelling, which goes, like, storytelling is so important anytime you're running a business or marketing anything. And it's like your calling card as a photographer. And because a lot of people jumped into the photography industry without maybe going to art school, I didn't go to art school either, but we haven't like had the skills of learning how to really develop a portfolio that's strong, that's concise, that's emotional, and that speaks to specific values and specific style, or even like really develop our own voice. I think a lot of times we're like, I'm just here to document this other person, I'll just do what they want. And kind of realizing that photography really is co-creative. We need to use our voice. We're also telling the story of someone else. And so when we develop a really strong portfolio, we curate, we decide what's really important to show and to not show. It helps us stand out, build trust, position ourselves as an artist and a partner instead of just a vendor. And it's a great first introduction to the type of service and experience you're going to provide for your clients. So, a lot of us want to have a really beautiful high-end experience, really take good care of people. And that portfolio is kind of like, hey, here's what you can expect from working with me. Like, I think life is so beautiful, and here's my perspective. And you're kind of like making a strong statement with your portfolio. So I think it's so important. And even if you aren't trying to be top of the market, it's still an important thing to do.
So I'm curious, and this is kind of where I alluded to my perspective earlier. I'm curious to get your take on something, and maybe just frame this in a way of conversation. Like, imagine you were having a conversation with another photographer, and they were like, Kristin, I get what you're saying, but at the end of the day, these days, especially with these phones and how accessible even so-called professional cameras are, it's so easy to take a decent picture. The technology that drives all of this makes it a lot easier for people. So the idea of having a good picture is relatively commonplace. It's also a very subjective thing. Photography is somewhat a commodity at this point, and the average consumer doesn't really know the difference between the nuanced differences that photographers notice from one image to the next. So as long as the experience is incredible, do the images really have that big of an impact on pricing? How would you respond to that?
I really think they do. I mean, yes, a lot of people aren't going to be able to tell the difference between good and great, but it is like art. And some people appreciate and collect and love art, and other people don't. And I think that when we have something really strong and really clear, we increase especially when there's so many good images. There's so many ways to take a good photo with the phone. I think it's even more important that we have a voice that comes through, that we share an opinion through our work, and that we make people think and feel things in an emotive way. So it's definitely not going to be for everyone. And I think that's kind of the point. You want to create something that's so different and unique that it really does draw in someone that is like, I view the world this way too, and I want to engage in it in this way as well. So it's definitely more challenging to do that, but I do think that it is really fulfilling as an artist and as a business person to create something that feels really strong and really like has a clear way of seeing the world, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, I could see that for sure. And there's something, I mean, I still remember, and I shot for about a decade. There's something really enjoyable about, I mean, whether it's something as simple as just playing with small adjustments to the image, or adding a preset, or back in the day it was more about Photoshop actions, but adding a finish and feel to the image that really resonates with you. And I guess the question mark, and it really is there's no like objective right answer per se in this conversation, but the question that I continue to ask is, how much of an impact does all of that time, attention, energy that we give to the imagery actually, how does that actually translate to increasing or building our business at the end of the day? And I wonder what that kind of balance looks like. I understand for photographers who are in it, I understand the idea of doing that for themselves, but like we were talking about earlier, there's us, and then there's the clients that we're serving. And I wonder how much weight focusing on our images actually carries to that experience that we're actually trying to create for our client. When we serve them in the end of the day, does that actually serve them better? Or should we really be focusing more on the experience? So that's kind of that's the conversation. It's the question, and it's an open-ended one, I will say.
Yeah.
But I was curious to kind of get your take on that. But we can kind of shift forward when it comes to building a portfolio like you're talking about, or developing it, improving a portfolio. And I have to jump back to your site here too, because your work really is truly beautiful. I'm scrolling down here. For anybody who's not live streaming with us, you can go to Kristin Sweeting, Kristin Sweeting.com, and see Kristin's work. It really is beautiful, very wide-ranging, Kristin. And truly lovely. I mean, I've seen a lot of photography over the last couple of decades. It's really, really nice. So I got to give you props for that. But
thank you.
What would you say are a few of the most important elements that make up a strong portfolio? Things, very specific things that listeners can go and work on with their own portfolio.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And a little bit back to your thing too. I think what we really want is congruency in things. So I think when we're delivering a really beautiful experience, we want that to be congruent with our images too. So I think kind of lifting everything at the same time and not letting one slip as we only focus on one or the other. But I think like we want to feel that congruence of what we're receiving. And even I think art is so transformative, and we get to lead people on this journey through their own self-transformation with the images that we take of them too, and how we see them. So, but yeah, I would say as far as things to really look for as you're up-leveling your portfolio, is something unexpected, consistency, and again, that congruency of like, is it matching with everything else that you're saying and doing? And then attention to detail. I think noticing what's in the backgrounds, noticing, really being intuitive to your client. I think all of that plays together, and what creates a better image is also creating a better emotional experience for your client in the moment too. So I think a lot of them play together a lot more naturally than we think as well. When we're viewing our client as a piece of art, when we're telling their story in a way that is really beautiful, they feel that too, and it helps us raise kind of to this higher level of transformation, which is always what I come back to in the end, is this person's on a journey to be the best version of themselves. And as an artist, I can help them achieve that by seeing themselves in this art and seeing themselves in this work. And I think that is just so fulfilling and so powerful for our clients.
Okay, so I'm taking notes here. I told you I would before we get started, but I've got this old school notebook here. 3 points.
Said a lot.
No, it's good. I want to go back through it. So unexpected, consistency, and then attention to detail. And by the way, I should mention too, because I didn't do this earlier, I'm pulling this up here on screen, but for anybody who's listening in, I should also mention Kristin's business account specifically. It's Kristin Sweeting Photography. And of course, we'll link to this in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com as well. And I'm just scrolling through here. And Kristin, maybe I want to come back to the first point that you made, which is to kind of surprise them with the unexpected. And I really love that. I think that's a lot of fun. Can you point to maybe a tangible example on your website or Instagram feed where we can kind of go look at an individual image and talk about how you actually implement that in your business?
Yeah, there is a photo there's a couple that are similar, but there's one on my website and then one on Instagram, on my main Instagram of, I can kind of show you maybe. This one is one of my portfolio images that gets the most, I maybe took it 7 years ago and it still gets the most, people will point it out and they'll just be like, that looked so timeless. It was really just this moment of her laughing, talking to one of her guests. And I popped a direct flash on with some black and white Tri-X film. So like direct flash before it was trendy, popped it off while she was talking to someone. And I get people all the time that are like, that looks like, she looks like Meredith from Grey's Anatomy. And I'm like, it's not, but she does just look like stunning. And so what I tell my clients is I'm like, my goal when I go into a wedding obviously is to capture your whole day, but I'm looking for the one photo that I can get of you where you'll show your grandchildren and they'll just be like, what a freaking gorgeous grandma we have. Like, can you believe this iconic photo? So I'm always kind of looking for those like iconic, unexpected, laughing photos. There's one of a grandma dancing too that's similar, like direct flash, black and white film. She's just having the best time, and those end up being some of my clients' favorite images. Or those, yeah, you found it. Yeah, exactly. It's just like she's just doing her thing, and just got that moment right as she was having the best time.
Yeah, I want to pull that image back up, actually, that you were talking about first here. And for anybody listening in, if you go to kristinsweeting.com, you can see this. It reminds me a lot of, did you ever follow Joe Busink?
A little bit, yeah.
So Joe photographed Jessica Simpson's wedding way back in the day, and they produced this beautiful coffee table book from it. And a lot of the imagery kind of looks like this. It's got a beautiful feel to it.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. I mean, I do shoot for my clients, but in the back of my head, I'm always like, I want to come away with one photo that is portfolio worthy, or a few photos that I'm like, this is my best work, and because I don't think every single photo we take can be that, but I think if we're trying to get that one little piece of magic, or that, those few iconic photos, I think we can really capture a magic moment when we're on the lookout for it.
So, and by the way, thanks for covering me there for a second. I've told you before we got started, my allergies have been bothering me a little bit, and suddenly my throat started itching really bad. I'm like, I can't keep talking.
Yeah, welcome to Tennessee, right?
Seriously, yeah. But when you talk about the unexpected, so can you talk just a little bit from a technical standpoint or otherwise, when you're talking about this idea of unexpected with this image here, that we were showing on screen, the bride smiling, direct flash, black and white, very iconic for sure. And by the way, I used to shoot Tri-X. I love the film. But,
oh, it's the best.
Oh, it's absolutely wonderful. When you say unexpected, can you explain what you mean in the context of this particular image?
Well, like, this is never a photo that someone would put on their Pinterest board and be like, can you get this photo? Like, it can't be replicated. It was just kind of a mundane moment. She was just talking to one of her guests. And a lot of times that's when, I used to just kind of call it in. I'd go get a snack. I'd like let them walk around and talk to their friends. Yeah. And I kind of have to like make myself be a little nosy and be a little intrusive sometimes to get the unexpected photo. But I think technically having a wider lens on, being prepared with like a direct flash or something that can let you capture whatever happens, and not have to be so precise. And then just kind of like, sometimes it's even holding the camera away from my face so people aren't expecting it. I think with that one, I definitely was looking, but just having the camera up more than you think and being ready for when something out of the blue happens. And sometimes you can anticipate it and sometimes you can't, but just kind of like being on the lookout for those moments.
So the unexpected kind of, I guess you're referring more to getting outside that kind of stereotypical list of images, the shot list that one would expect, like you said, looking on Pinterest or a blog or otherwise, or even in an album, going outside of that and bringing them something they didn't expect. I think that's really cool. We used to do something that was really fun, actually. And I wish I had it in front of me so I could kind of show everybody who's watching, but got a hold of a 35 millimeter Russian panoramic camera. And
fun.
As part of the wedding day, I would photograph a portrait for them using this particular camera, and then give them later on it was an 8x20 print on fine art paper. We foam mounted it, presented it in a box, branded box with tissue paper. And it was such a cool little thing that actually for the longest time, we didn't even tell them we were going to do it. It was totally unexpected. It was a surprise gift that we could give them. And it was so much fun to do that. And I think it added a little bit of, and I think you even alluded to this too, it added some interest to the day where normally you'd just be kind of in automatic mode, just, shooting the shots you're supposed to get. It gave you something to kind of look forward to and to work for. And you felt like you were producing an art piece as opposed to just taking the same pictures that you're going to take at every single wedding. So it kind of gives the photographer something to look forward to as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love some of the research on flow state and, having some unexpected moments or things that kind of like trigger a flow state. But, I think it does two things. For your clients, it helps them be more present in the moment. When you're switching up what you're doing through the day, you have a different camera you're using, or you create something that's a little bit out of the ordinary, or you're not just directing throughout the day. Because, we do a lot of posing, a lot of directing. We're still doing candids too, but a lot of it is I'm guiding people through the day. And so when there's something that's kind of out of the blue or unexpected, I think it helps them kind of put like a stake in the ground in time and be a lot more present. I think it does that for me too, because I can definitely get in the groove and not be fully present. It's like just kind of moving through the day. And so I think for both sides of that co-creative process, the client and the photographer, even if you just bring a different camera or shoot one roll of film or take one Polaroid or shoot at a different angle than you normally do or with a different lens that you normally do for one section of the day, you can create something really cool and different just by breaking your patterns.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And you summed that up beautifully. The idea of breaking patterns. We all need to do it in our life. Personally, professionally, we got to break the patterns. It's so easy to get in that rut. Even at a younger age, people think about quote unquote old people as the ones that get in a rut and they're just stuck in their ways and they always do the same thing. Certainly you want to avoid that too, especially for the sake of mental health in the long term. But even as relatively young individuals, as business owners, it's easy, especially in something like wedding or portrait photographer, where as we get comfortable, we know the routine. It's easy to just kind of do that routine and be done with it. Mixing it up, not only for the client's sake, but for our sake as well, is a really great thing. So I'm glad this is fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so jumping to the second point that you made, the importance of consistency. Can you explain what you mean by the idea of consistency?
Yeah, I think that having a consistent quality is important. I don't think that you have to deliver the same photo over and over. Actually, I don't like that, but I do think the quality of what people can expect to get from you and the quality of the experience, and that there should be some kind of through line through your whole business. Because I know we've all had the experience of you go and you get a haircut one time, it's great, and you're like, yay, I found my new hair cutter, and then you go back and it's like horrible, and all of a sudden you have a Rachel's bob from like the 90s or whatever, and you're like, oh no, like, was this just a fluke? Can I trust this person again? It disrupts the trust that you've built. And when you're going for that lifetime client, you're going for trust overall, like, you have to be able to know that you can deliver again and again, no matter the circumstances, no matter whether it's raining, no matter whether this or that, like being so good at your craft that you can deliver consistent results across the board, I think is really important for this portfolio and pricing piece too.
Now, is it important, do you think, because I look at your Instagram feed, for example, and I see kind of a variety of styles across that feed. Are you talking as much about consistency in the actual, say, the editing style or even the shooting style? Or are you talking more about consistency and experience overall? What are you referring to?
I think mostly the consistency and quality and experience overall. And some to the style too, but you're right. I shoot black and white and I shoot color and I'll do some film. And so I think like as long as people know to expect that you're throwing in some film or you're doing something a little bit here or there. But I do think editing consistency and having like a brand that people can come back to and depend on is really important. Cool.
Okay. So then we come to point number 3, which is attention to detail. This is an important thing on all levels, really, for business owners to be paying attention to. But when it comes to the context of this conversation around portfolio, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Even little things in portfolios matter, like looking for, again, that congruency. Like if you're trying to deliver something that's really high quality, is there something in the photo in the background that maybe doesn't fit with that? Or, attention to detail of making sure you're kind of watching for the dress and watching for the flowers. And not that everything has to be perfect and curated, but just having an eye on the details in different moments. And if you're trying to do a really beautiful posed photo, looking at all the different elements that might be in the frame. Sometimes it's editing, but more for me, I'd rather move someone. I'm like, if there's something that I'm not going to want in the photo later, I move to a different spot. But I just think like having an eye on all the things that are happening. Another thing for me is that I always try to look out for is everyone in this photo going to be glad that this photo is in this gallery? Not everyone has that style. Some people are like, it's funny and I want that photo in there and I like that moment. And yes, sometimes, but it like takes some discretion. But I do try to go through and I'm like, Is the mother going to be glad that this photo is in this album? Is the bridesmaid that is blinking going to be glad this is in their photo? And I try to have everyone's back, because again, I'm thinking people first and all the different people that are influencing this day, that are important on this day, and can I have their back through the curation process too?
Yeah, when I think about differentiating factors in photography itself, and you talk about the quality of a photographer's work, attention to detail, I think, really does make a big difference, because pretty much anybody, especially with all the AI tools these days, can go into an image after the fact and make it look better, right? Including the average consumer.
Yeah.
So what makes a professional photographer a photographer, other than the fact that they're getting compensated monetarily? What makes them that much better as a photographer? And it's that attention to detail, the composition, the attention, like you said, to the things in the background. I think still a lot of photographers don't pay enough attention to that. You see the telephone pole sticking out or the tree sticking out from behind their head, this kind of thing. You really do have to pay a lot of attention to that. It also then saves time and resources after the fact in post-production, not having to compensate or correct for that. Yeah, that's good. Well, I know this is a conversation that we've kind of just barely scratched the surface of, but I think it's been a good inroads into the topic. And maybe just as we finish up here, I'd love for you, if you will, you didn't ask me to do this ahead of time, but you mentioned your education at the outset, and I'm personally kind of curious about what it is that you're offering. And I'm going to jump over to your site here. For anybody who's listening in, if you go to KristinSweeting.com and click on creatives, it takes you to dangerschool.com, which, by the way, brilliant URL. Good job getting that one. I'm a little bit of a nerd. I have endless URLs that I've purchased over times for different business ideas. But talk to us a little bit about this brand and what it's about.
Yeah. So Danger School, it's like business coaching and life coaching for photographers and creatives. And we have programs, we have a community, we have coaching, and then we have study abroad workshops where we go to a different country. We spend a week together. We travel and we do I'm all about experiential learning. So we'll jump in together and be in a place that you get out of your comfort zone and learn things together. So we kind of have the whole range of things. The two things I work with people most on is raising pricing and developing multiple streams of revenue. And again, a lot of that came out of my own story of some health challenges and single parenting and needing some security and some peace and some, just having a business that had consistent revenue and not just big injections of money every time I booked a wedding. So we've based a lot of our program off of that. There's a whole lot of mindset work involved too, and a lot of marketing. But yeah, Danger School is a community you can join. You get access to our whole program and then a supportive Facebook group with a monthly coaching call. So there's just a ton of really amazing supportive people in there that are doing amazing things. And it's just been fun to kind of develop community around helping others and doing our best work. And that's been really fun.
And talk to me about this idea of dangerous. It's interesting because I'm part of a mastermind and we were just talking about this very word dangerous, what it means to be dangerous. You don't hear the word used in most cases outside of something with negative connotation, right? Don't do that. Yeah. It's dangerous. But when it comes to developing as an individual and certainly as a business owner, what does it mean to you to become dangerous?
Yeah. I mean, again, going back to my own story, there were years and years of people pleasing, doing only what I thought I was supposed to do, and really not kind of making scary moves to claim my own life and do things outside the box. And so to me, a dangerous creative is someone that is making the scary choices to stand out, to do something different. It's way easier to blend in and do what everyone else is doing. It's terrifying to our nervous system to stand out. And so we use it kind of as like, it feels dangerous, but really it's the brave thing to do. And it is so fulfilling in so many ways. And also having a business based really solidly on what we value and developing something that is really, really meaningful for our clients and for ourselves and can make a really big difference in not only our life, but the lives of the community around us and the people that we're working with. So that's what Dangerous Creatives means to me. They're out there, raising money for good causes, being super generous, caring for their clients, starting new revenue streams, just like crushing life. And it's really fun to get to just like facilitate conversations and encourage people on their journeys.
You mentioned that it's easy to kind of copy paste, right? To do what everybody around you is doing. And there is a tendency of that in the photography industry. I've certainly been guilty of it at times. Rather than doing the hard work to figure out how you can set yourself apart, and then taking a bit of a risk to step beyond that so-called box and do something that's different. Yeah, it can be a little overwhelming at the time, but the potential payoff can be quite large if we're willing to take that risk.
Totally.
It's really incredible. So I'm glad that the reason I'm pausing there is because I so badly want to go into a story, but I know that we could draw that conversation very easily. It's a very important point. I'm glad that you highlight it. And for those of you listening in, if you want to go to dangerschool.com, you can check out more information about that whole program. And then Dangerous Creatives podcast on Apple Podcasts. And Kristin, I'm assuming pretty much all the other podcast platforms that they can find that.
Yeah, it's all over. And we're going to start doing some live coaching on there too. It's really fun. And I feel like we're so aligned. I'm like, if you like the Boca podcast, you'll probably like the Dangerous Creatives podcast.
We'll make sure to link to it in the show notes at bocapodcast.com so everybody can go find that as well. Kristin, thank you so much for being willing to do this conversation today. And maybe we can look forward to another one in the relatively near future. Hope everybody listening in, you'll go check out Kristin's work. Make sure to follow on Instagram. And everybody have an absolutely amazing week. Thanks, Kristin.
Bye, thanks.